Ambrose Bierce was born on June 24, 1842, in Meigs County, Ohio. No one quite knows the exact year of his death, but it is estimated that he passed away around the year 1914. He was one of 13 children. His parents are Marcus Aurelius and Laura Bierce. In 1871, Bierce married Molly Day. He had 3 children, Helen Bierce, Day Bierce, and Lee Bierce. At 17, Bierce attended the Kentucky Military Institute. 2 years later, he enlisted as a private in the 9th Indiana Volunteer Infantry, where he served in the Union Army of the Civil War. Bierce fought in one of the first battles of the Civil War at Philippi, West Virginia. He was involved in many bloody and gruesome battles during the Civil War, including the battle at Shiloh, Chickamauga, Lookout Mountain, Kennesaw Mountain, and Missionary Ridge. The more that Bierce became a part of the war, the more he committed acts of bravery. He rose the ranks of the Civil War. He went from being a private to becoming a sergeant, then a lieutenant. Then he received the position of a topographical engineer. In June of 1864, Bierce suffered a severe head wound, and his brother Albert nurtured him back to health. Bierce re-enlisted in the 4th Army Corps. He was discharged in the spring of 1865. Shortly after Bierce's dismissal from the Civil War is when his literary career took off. Most of Bierce's short stories have a theme of anguish, both physically and mentally, that is a result of the war. His stories are a mix of journalism, fiction, satirical, and polemic writing. Bierce wrote about the ugly side of war that had yet to be introduced. His stories dealt with the unseen war and the brutality that came with. Another thing that Bierce introduced was the wasted lives, death, disease, mutilation, other gruesome sides of war, which was something that was never written about before.
I cannot tell you why, but I find myself returning often to the battlefield at Shiloh. Old days, when all the world was beautiful and strange, and unfamiliar constellations burned across the southern midnight, and the mockingbird poured out his heart in the moon-gilded magnolia. When there was something new under a new sun. Will your far fine memories ever cease to lay contrasting pictures across the harsher features of this later time, accentuating the ugliness of this longer and tamer life? Is it not strange that the phantoms of a blood-stained period have so airy a grace and look with so tender eyes that I recall only with difficulty the danger and death and horrors of the time, and with no effort at all that was gracious and picturesque? Ah, youth! There is no wizard such as thou. Lend me thine artist hand upon the dull canvas of today. Gild but for one moment the drear and somber scenes of the present time, and I will gladly surrender another life than the one I should have thrown away at Shiloh.
As most of his writings are dark, sarcastic, and obscure, He earned the nickname of Bitter Bierce. Bierce eventually became famous as a contributor and editor for a number of local newspapers, including the San Francisco newsletters, the Argonaut, and the Wasp. In 1887, Bierce received the position as a writer for William Randolph Hearst's paper, The Examiner, a position that he would hold for the next 20 years of his life.
Ambrose Bierce catches the vision of the human race, trapped and betrayed in the wilderness of the world.
Life is war, Miss Atherton. And to live is to be a soldier.
Excuse me, sir. What word from the lines? Are the Yankees close?
Yes, actually. The Yanks are repairing the railroads and getting ready for another advance. They've reached the Owl Creek Bridge.
Owl Creek, that's about,
30 miles or so.
See that? That's what civilians think war looks like.
The enemy is moving toward our works.
More recently, there was a movie made inspired by Bierce's writings entitled Ambrose Bierce, Civil War Stories. Bierce was named one of the top storytellers of the late 19th century. His most famous war story is an occurrence at Owl Creek Bridge. Since Bierce had personally experienced the war in all of its brutality, that is what he wrote about. He wrote to educate about the miserable side of war. He wrote to let his readers know what the war was like in a soldier's eyes, and to show the negative aspects of the war. Bierce had retired in his 70s. Then he began to tour the famous battlefields of the Civil War. He then crossed over the Mexican border at El Paso to meet with Pancho Villa during the time of the Mexican Revolution. A few weeks after that, the world had lost contact with Bierce. No one knows exactly what happened to Ambrose Bierce, which had seemed like the ending to many of his writings. His disappearance was intriguing to many because Bierce often wrote of cynical, dark stories of disappearances, much like his own. So many wonder if he staged his own disappearance. It is theorized that Bierce had died in a battle with Pancho Villa. Others suggest that the Mexican revolutionary leader had executed Bierce for his critical journalistic styles. Another theory is that he found a dimensional portal to a different world, much like in his writings, and that's why he was never heard from again. Though no one knows exactly what happened to Ambrose Bierce, they know how his writings have brought new insight into the minds of the soldiers during the Civil War, and how they allowed his readers to experience the pain and anguish that many soldiers had experienced. He taught the readers about the ugly sides of the war that no one might have known otherwise.